Africa in the agriculture space. And tomorrow you'll be hearing from her. Tomorrow you'll also be hearing more from me around the framework and how we would like to use it to drive future engagement. But for now, we're going to save some time, and then I'm going to bring us on to our next speaker, Dr. Andrew Nevine. Dr. Andrew Nevine is from the PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's the Chief Economist for Africa at PWC in Lagos, Nigeria. He's joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. And I'm going to ask him to join, and I'll pull up his slides as well. Dr. Andrew. That's okay. Please, I have your slide on. I hope people can see your slides. Just let me know what page you want me to be on.
All right, so I'll tell you. So I only have a few slides today and a few things to say. But first, let me great thank you to Toyin for all her efforts on this. As she said, I mean, we've been friends for a number of years. I'm based in Lagos. I've been there more than a decade. I want to, in this sort of opening session, just kind of situate. I mean, obviously everyone here is a fan or a potential fan of Africa's Africa Rising, if we want to use that term. But I just want to give a few more numbers just to put this all in context of how immensely, not only the opportunity, but from a global viewpoint, kind of the shift that is happening right now, and is essentially going to put Africa at the center of the globe. And so I brought a few demographic slides on this, and maybe Toyin, you can go to the next slide. But even these slides that I brought are out of date. For those of you who follow the news closely, you might have seen 2 weeks ago that the UN released a new projection of global population, which incredibly important. I mean, I think some good news, but also some real implications for how the world will evolve. I mean, to begin with, they reduced by 2 billion people the projection of population in 2100. And the basic reason for this is that fertility rates dropping fast around the world, much faster than many people realize. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone on this, on the webinar today and tomorrow understands that countries like Japan, China, Germany, Russia, Korea, Poland, Italy, all have declining populations now and have quite rapidly declining working age populations. But what you may not know is, in fact, a lot of the countries that you think might compensate it for it also don't have very high fertility. So, for example, Brazil's total fertility rate is 1.7. As you all know, the requirement for replacement of population is 2.1. So if it's 1.7, eventually your population will start to decline. India is only at 2.2. Thailand is at 1.5. And so the reality is right now, if you look at the globe, the world as a total, the number of working age adults outside of sub-Saharan Africa has already peaked. The number of children outside of sub-Saharan Africa has already peaked. And this first slide just takes a look at it and look in terms of the number of births that are going on now. So the first two bars, this is in 5-year increments, but the first two bars show the number of births in Africa versus the whole rest of the world combined. And you can see, of course, the light orange bar on the right-hand side, the light orange part of the bar is all of Asia. So it includes India, China, etc. And you can already see that as we sit here today, the number of births in Africa is already more than half of the number of births in Asia. In the period from 2030 to 2035, the number of births in Africa is more than half of the rest of the world. And when you get out a little bit further, because of course the declining number of women of childbearing age in other countries around the world, the number of births in Africa, in fact, is not too far off the number of births in the entire rest of the world. And you might think this is sort of an arcane something in the future, but actually these demographic realities really unfold very fast. So if there are, to put 40 million births in Africa this year, it means in 20 years, when you start to be economically productive, there'll be 40 million Africans. In that same year, this year, there's 5 million births in Europe, which means that there's only going to be 5 million economically active 20-year-olds in 20 years from now. And I mean, I think, sure, I mean, many, of course, at my age, I may not be around, but many of the people, I hope all of the people on the webinar today are still going to be very active in 2040. So this is happening so fast on this. And as I said, this is already out of date because the UN, this doesn't take account of what the UN just announced 2 weeks ago. Next slide, Toyin. So if we just look at a few countries, I mean, Toyin's based in the United States. So you look at Nigeria, and again, this is expressed in 5-year increments. So let me translate it into this year. This year, there'll be more than 7 million births in Nigeria. And I believe in the United States, there'll be less than 3 million births, which again means in 20 years, there'll be 7 million economically active Nigerians and 3 million Americans. And of course, America has some immigration, but we've seen that fall down. And you can see how rapidly Nigeria is increasing its population. And of course, the number of births in China, the number of births in India is actually starting to fall pretty fast out of this. But even in countries, as I said before, that you may think of as fast growing, like Indonesia, the numbers falling. In Brazil, the number of births is falling. So this economic tilt, I mean, it means it has a few implications. I mean, one of the implications is that to expect companies to be able to grow in markets where population is shrinking is not realistic. So if you take Europe as a whole, there's no question that we're going to have growth rates. If we achieve 1% growth rate, that would be extraordinary, because how do you get GDP growth? You get as a combination of the number of people participating in the economy times the productivity, right? So if the number of people participating in the economy is declining because the working age population is declining, that headwind has to be offset by productivity. And productivity, it's hard to see it increasing more than 1% per year. So if you're a company that wants growth, there really are no new markets in Europe, China, India. You might get some growth as they increase productivity. But the only market that's really going to be exploding is Africa. And just a final comment on this slide. Part of that UN report, I mean, many people on this call would have known that it's projected in 2045 that Nigeria would have a greater population than the United States. But in fact, this report came out and said this century, Nigeria will become the second most populous nation on the planet. It will surpass China. Which is extraordinary, because if you look at the map, and Nigeria is not a small country, but it's not a huge country physically, occupying one corner of what's an immense continent. Next slide, please. So then it's just translating this into where we're going. In 2050, you can see the top bar of each of the three just shows, again, Asia is only about twice as big as Africa. Africa is bigger than, I think, North America, and Europe sort of put together by a long range, and that's where the new market's going to be. Next slide. And then looking again by country, I mean, this shows Nigeria past the United States has not been updated for what I just mentioned, which is, of course, that Nigeria is likely to pass China in this by the end of the century on there. So that's all the slides I brought. I just thought this demographic story, we talk about it sometimes, but it's not really realized. But let me dive in a little bit about where I see the African economy right now, why the opportunities are so enormous on there. And I think one of the problems that's happening right now in Africa is that when we look at the headline GDP growth numbers, if we go pre-COVID, it was about 3% per year, which doesn't sound very good and really isn't very good. But the reason for this, because the population growth is close to 3%, but the reason for this was, if you disaggregate sub-Saharan Africa, what you find, in fact, is that you have the two largest economies doing very poorly. So we have South Africa, which for its own historical reasons is really struggling. And we also have my home, which is a great pain to me as an economist in the country. I'm sorry, do you want me to, Tony? I'm happy to put on my camera if people want to see me if I speak. But
nice. I want to see your face if you're fine with that. Okay, you twist your phone. Turn your phone.
Is that working?
Yeah, you're on. You need to turn your phone.
No, but that requires a whole. But it has to
Nice,
be.
nice, nice. Now it's perfect, perfect. Thank you. I want to see your face.
All
Good.
right. So you know, as I said, what people look from outside and maybe see not seeing this Africa story quite, or the demographic story, because when they look at the headline number, which is how we all think about this headline GDP, we see 3%. But what's going on, as I said, is South Africa is doing very poorly. In my own home, Nigeria is doing very poorly. And what the 3% mask is how many bright spots there are on the continent. So if we look at Senegal, we look at Cote d'Ivoire, we've already discussed Rwanda, Botswana, Kenya, Ethiopia is doing fantastically well. So actually, you know, in each year you get more and more of these places that are doing well, and you've got in many of these places a virtuous circle. So you have economic results, you have better governance, you have more transparency and accountability demanded by the population, which feeds into better public services, less corruption, more transparency. And you know, one of the countries, perhaps the most advanced, where you can see this in addition to Rwanda, but is Ghana, which is a neighbor of Nigeria. And it's really extraordinary. I mean, I went to Ghana the first time in 1988 and or 87, I think, and it was a very difficult time in Ghana. Under President Rawlings, Captain Rawlings, gold price was low. But now Ghana is just doing incredibly well, and it's very good on a security viewpoint, on a governance viewpoint, on the ability of the public sector to deliver things that are required, to its embracing of free market principles in the right way that's appropriate. So there are all these bright spots. As I said, I've listed out 10 bright spots on that. So when you look at the headline number of 3%, you say, no, this is not doing very well. It's growing 3% of population. But the GDP is not growing. But actually, 10 bright spots means we're about to start, just continue this momentum throughout the continent, and hopefully it will spread to Nigeria as well, because then you'll really see the headline numbers at an aggregate level take off. So why is that important for all of us here today, particularly people kind of based in the United States? I mean, to begin with, I think it's fair to say that there is not enough engagement between the United States and Africa, just in terms of a business, and this may be true for all parts of the world, but particularly given the United States is still the world's largest economy and has many of the world's leading companies. There needs to be more engagement with this immense emerging market and immense population. And of course, obviously in Africa, we want to have a greater capability to produce things ourselves. So we want to produce electricity, we want to have better manufacturing, etc. But to do those things, as Toyin said, we still need to import things that we can't. We're not going to make computers anytime soon. We're not going to make cell phones. We're not going to make advanced machinery that are required for manufacturing. So we still need a significant amount and more of these imports to help build up our economies here. And I think that's where the American companies in particular need to play a key role, and are currently, certainly in Nigeria, kind of underrepresented on that, because I mean, the American companies bring standards, they bring transparency, they don't participate in some of the practices that other nations doing business in Africa do, that contribute to ongoing problems in it. They're very committed to financial transparency. So I think when you take the kind of totality of the American business interest in Africa at this time, we would really like to see American companies step up and play a bigger role. Now, a big part of this too is the role of the diaspora, for many reasons. I mean, one reason, quite simply, is that the diaspora, certainly in Nigeria, is holding up the economy. So, we have a large number of upper middle class professionals that emigrate out of Nigeria. They settle in Canada, they settle in the UK, they settle in the United States, and they remit a very large amount of money, which we actually wrote a paper last year because I got tired of hearing that Nigeria was an oil economy. We just showed that, in fact, what's holding up the economy is the diaspora. So that is critical. But then people sometimes say, well, the diaspora is a brain drain. And I guess we look at it a little bit differently and say the diaspora is the biggest asset that Nigeria and Africa has, because that connects Africa to the rest of the world. And of course, certainly the Nigerian diaspora has been immensely successful. I mean, it's amazing as a relatively new diaspora in the United States, the average American of Nigerian heritage has a higher income than the average American, which is an extraordinary feat and a testament to the capabilities and the interest in education of Nigerians and Africans in general. But the diaspora plays a key role in bridging all of this because they are the ones that can help America play a bigger role in sub-Saharan Africa, and they play a role in increasing the African brand throughout the United States and with African companies and in American communities. And that, I mean, if we take Nigeria, my home, of course, I mean, it has a negative perception around the world. But when you work with a professional colleague who's from Nigeria, that's now how that perception gets altered, and you start to understand that Nigeria and Africa has so much to alter. So in building up these business ties between the United States and Africa, the diaspora has a key role, and the governments back in Africa have a key role in nurturing the diaspora and creating the opportunities to connect together with the diaspora and what they can bring to the country, and establishing new businesses and new trade routes and new investment routes on that. So just standing back, from my section, I think just these are the key messages I would like to leave you with. I mean, we've just shown from a demographic perspective, the weight is moving so rapidly to Africa. It is not recognized sufficiently how major this change is, and it means that businesses that want to grow. The biggest growth markets on the planet are rapidly becoming African. Of course, they have big populations. Nigeria is 200 million, going on to a very big number. Ethiopia is 100 million. Kenya is 50 million. South Africa is 50 million. Tanzania is growing very rapidly. So these are not small population countries with small opportunities. They have immense opportunities for people that can figure out how to connect to Africa. But at the same time, Africa needs engagement from the United States, needs from everywhere, but particularly I think at this stage from where I sit, from the United States, because of the United States' role in the economy, its role in standards, as I said, and we need more attention from the United States. But the other aspect of this that's so critical is the alternative. So, I've just given a narrative about Africa's population, demographic weight, Africa rising story. The alternative to Africa becoming prosperous is really something that's almost unthinkable. I mean, if you have, for example, a failed state in Nigeria because we continue to have poverty and economic stress and violence around from various sources around the country, a failed Nigeria would be a catastrophe, not just for Nigeria and Africa, but for Europe, but also for the United States on that. And I think that it's everyone on the planet has an extremely strong interest in a prosperous and stable Africa. And to that extent, people need to play a role in helping it develop. And this role is not aid. Africa is past the aid situation. And, I've never been a big fan of the impact of aid in Africa sitting where I sit. What Africa needs is develop a stronger and stronger private sector in every country, in every industry. It already has vibrant NGOs, it has vibrant civic organizations on that. If we can complement it with a private sector, as I always say in Nigeria, that's 10 to 15 times bigger than we currently have, then we'll be on our path. But the other implication of all this is, when I say 10 to 15 times bigger in a decade, it means there's immense opportunities for people who build it, despite all the challenges we see in Africa. For those who are able to build a proper business in Africa, in any African country, I mean, they're going to build something large on a big scale, something very, very material. So I think those opportunities, there aren't a lot of them around the world, but they're there in Africa on that. And then the final thing I'll just say today, among the American, I obviously have many American company friends in Nigeria, but I wanted to give a big shout out to Google. In West Africa, which is run by an extraordinary Nigerian woman, Juliet, and who's just, basically one of the African technology, well, not just technology, absolutely superstars in Africa. But I think she also holds American citizenship on that. But it's great to see Google in West Africa, what they're doing. And one of the things that just shows you how far Africa's coming is, this is not just a question of Google having a presence, but they're building out development centers in Nigeria, in Lagos, because they recognize the amount of talent that is available in the market. Of course, the low cost the programmers have, developers, engineers currently have on there, but it's a great success story of an American company. And, you know, obviously it's one of the mega companies, but I think there's many more success stories for American companies coming at every scale, every size in Nigeria and across sub-Saharan Africa. So let me stop there and say, thank you to Toyin for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be part of this. She's made more efforts than anyone I know in the last 5 years to connect Africa to the United States. It'll be interesting to see. Susan Rice, of course, was at McKinsey in Toronto when I was there. She was a friend of mine. It'll be remarkable to see if Susan became vice president, to then kind of see the connectivity between, because of course she has great interest in Africa. But regardless of what happens politically in the United States, I'd like to see more engagement. We need to see more engagement between the United States and sub-Saharan Africa. So thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's amazing. So I already see some questions for you. So just to guide people, let's use the Q&A. Right below you see the Q&A section. Let's keep questions there, and then let's use this chat room to stay, to continue networking. So I have a question, Dr. Andrew. From a private sector standpoint in the US, there's this, when it comes to, let's say, stock market, let's even go back to basics. There's still so many people that do not even understand that there are sophisticated stock and stuff happening on the continent. Like, what would you like to say to those people in terms of economic activities happening from a commercial standpoint in terms of a stock?
Well, I think that, I mean, it's a good point you make. I mean, I think one of the things we suffer from in Africa, quite frankly, is you go back to the aid agencies. I mean, a lot of people are projecting negative images about Africa and sort of rural poverty and sorry, I'll use the term poverty porn in there. And that sort of negates kind of what's happening around the continent. And I think that Africa needs to make more of an effort to come out and tell their story. I mean, obviously, there's many sophisticated urban centers around the continent, and the truth is, if we're honest, if you just think about expatriates for a moment, where do expatriates want to be? They want to be in Addis Ababa, they want to be in Nairobi, they want to be in Cape Town. Many kind of attractive places with a real buzz, and this buzz is across many dimensions. So, in Lagos we have the tech buzz, and we're starting to get more and more connectivity between Silicon Valley and Nigeria, and I don't know. I think E's on the show, right? So everyone here, when you have this, so E is so famous. His name has been reduced to a single letter on that. But he's a remarkable young Nigerian, the founder of both, co-founder of Andela and Flutterwave, both Silicon Valley supported companies that have been successful technology companies in Africa. And it just shows you, for investors, for example, these VC investors that have taken the time and had the courage to take a look at Africa, there's lots of things that are possible out there. I guess what I would say to American, larger American companies, not everyone needs to, but certainly I think large companies in the United States, need to just invest some time in Africa. And that doesn't necessarily involve a lot of money at this stage. I mean, that requires careful analysis, but it does involve getting people to go on the visits, go have a look around, including the CEO. I mean, I think one thing that's really helped PWC, for example, not that we're an American company, but our largest footprint is the United States. But I mean, we've had the global head of PWC out to Africa a number of times, and it really makes a difference to make those visits and then come away with a different impression. I mean, certainly, I think people that go to Nairobi, people that go to Accra, people that go to Abidjan, Dakar, Addis Ababa come with a very positive impression. People that go to Lagos, a little bit more difficult for those familiar with Nigeria, but they all come away with recognizing the energy level, the level of entrepreneurship on that. So out of that you start to get the ideas of how to participate on it. So more connectivity, but at the same time, as I said, I do think that the African governments at this stage need to make more of an effort to tell a different narrative. I mean, if you take the Rwanda story for a moment, I mean, there are some mixed views on the kind of political system in Rwanda, but let's put those aside for a moment. In terms of the raw numbers of things that people look at, Rwanda is extraordinary. And if you take something like ease of doing business, I think the last number I saw is 29th. So 29th, that would rank ahead of Spain, Germany, Italy. It may rank ahead of Canada. I can't remember on that. But, you know, it's an extraordinary accomplishment from a place that had such a horrific civil war 26 years ago. So I think Africa needs to get better at telling these stories. I think the other thing that's hampered Africa to a large extent is a lack of unity in Africa working together. But I think that's changing. You can really see now a kind of new sense of Pan-Africanism. The African Union has done a great job. People are behind the AFCFTA, the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which again will spur economic opportunities for people outside of and Americans as well. So telling that story and increasing integration in Africa are just going to create more and more opportunities for those inside Africa and outside.
Fantastic. Wow, you're popular, Dr. Nevin. We have some questions here for you. Okay. Sam Lombardo says, Dr. Nevin, where do you see special economic zones fitting into Africa's development?
Yeah, so I mean, I have to say I've never been a massive fan of inland economic zone. Sorry, if we mean by an economic zone, special tax breaks and concessions, I've never been a huge fan of those inland. I mean, I can understand there should be like that at the port. So if you import, well, not import, bring it into a special economic zone, do some processing and re-export to a neighboring country, you know, I think that can be beneficial. So I'm not in favor of creating, in the Nigerian context, for example, multiple special economic zones with tax breaks and concessions. What I am in favor of is creating industrial parks that specialize in certain things so that they can, you know, build up the ecosystem. So, for example, in Edo State in Nigeria, Benin City, then you know, the governor there is building out kind of an agro processing park. So it'll have electricity, it'll have there's security, obviously, stable power, stable infrastructure, bandwidth, productivity, and then you get many agro processors, so tomatoes and other vegetables, and all kind of agglomerated to create more of an ecosystem. And I'm a big fan of that. But one of the things that's really hampered certainly Nigeria is too many concessionary tax deals, and it creates a complexity on that. I don't think that the business people need, you know, concessions on taxes. What they need is a growing economy, a stable environment on that.
Okay, thank you. Adewale Dada said, there's an impression that EU companies have deeper commercial ties with the continent. How can European and North American based companies work together to broaden those ties?
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation. So I have to, certainly in Nigeria, if you looked at it overall, the European companies are more active. So you have Heineken, you have Unilever, for example, on that. And in Nigeria, we've just formed something called the European EBO, which is not IGBO, but the European Business Organization, which is grouping together the large European companies to influence policy. And collectively, it's bigger than the sort of U.S. Chamber of Commerce that way. So I mean, I think to some extent, it's just historic because of, you know, better or worse colonial ties. So to some extent, it's just time zone difference and flight difference. So I mean, if you're in Lagos, you have 5-6 flights a day overnight to Europe. You have 1 flight to Atlanta on that, so that the ties are deeper with Europe. So that's something. But as I said, just given what's happening with the demographics, it's something that Americans need to make a conscious effort to overcome and just make a commitment to be there. That, you know, talked about with Google. I mean, GE also, an American company that's made a big commitment to Nigeria, though, to be honest, because of some of their problems globally, they haven't been able to be as aggressive as they wanted. So I think there's lots of opportunity. But if I look at it, if I name and not choosing it for any particular reason, but I'd say one company that comes to mind that should be in Africa that I don't see, and maybe I'm wrong, is a company like Cargill. So you look at kind of perhaps the world's largest agricultural company at all points of the agricultural value chain. So in Nigeria, we've got Olam, There across West Africa, we have Olam very active, but Cargill is, Olam's a big company, but Cargill is a behemoth. So those sorts of American companies we'd like to see more active. If we look at the electricity, so go back to GE for a moment. The government in Nigeria has just signed with Siemens and not with GE, and I'm sure Siemens will do a good job, but I think American companies also need to be at the table.
Right. Well, so one of the things that I also try to get people to see is you can decide to export from America, for example, export probably machine equipment that would help galvanize development on the continent. But we also have a case for actually bringing manufacturing to Africa with the population growth that is going to explode. What is there anything you want to share around that area? Because right now, most companies in America want short-term benefits, which is fine. They just want to export today. But when you start looking at the graphs you showed us about the growth in terms of 30, 40 years, what would you say to CEOs in America today in terms of how do they build that strategy, not for them to just think about short-term wins, but growing with the continent?
Well, I think, you're exactly right. If you look at the demographics and you ask the question, who's actually going to be the workers in factories? And of course, automation would worry that there won't be any workers, but at the end of the day, there still needs to be some people there. And I think that if you go back to kind of the Asian story, I think obviously China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, has done very well in textiles and grown their economy a lot. And they have many challenges, but incomes have risen a lot there. So, but those places have in effect less and less people, right? So I think Governor Sanusi, of course, is the Emir of, who was suspended as governor and pushed out as Emir of Kano, which we could have a long discussion about, but has always been perhaps the most prescient thinker about the economy in Nigeria and Africa. It's very clear. It says the workshops of the world have to rotate from China to Africa. So then if you're an American CEO, I guess my message would be, it's far enough along, certainly in some places, to come and try it out. You can come to Ghana and set up something small and start to explore it in 2 or 3 years, set something up. They have a stable electricity supply that they manage well, relatively low cost because a lot of it is hydroelectric. And just the way, if you had said to people 40 years ago, you'd be manufacturing in Vietnam or Bangladesh, I think American CEOs might have been skeptical, but now these are massive manufacturing bases. So why not invest some effort now to be looking at not 40 years, but where is manufacturing going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now? The population to take that on is in Africa, and also they have large internal markets. So I don't think there's anything wrong with starting to investigate and possibly laying down a chip in some of these countries, perhaps not Nigeria, because we still have challenges around infrastructure and power and ease of doing business at the moment. But there are lots of other places in Africa where I think the time has come to really investigate, can you start up that manufacturing value chain? And Ethiopia comes to mind as well, and certainly some of the Tanzania or Kenya.
Fantastic. So I'll try to take one last question. There's one last question I want to pass to you before we move on to the next speaker. And so Hala King says, I see you're speaking about large companies entering agriculture, but how does this address the supply chain issues experienced by small, older farmers? How does the increase in oligopolies, I don't think I said that well, improve the supply chain issues we see in agriculture in Africa? So basically, with PWC, your firm works really with the biggest players in the world. But when it comes to the opportunities in small, medium-sized companies, whether in the US or back in Africa, being able to connect the dots, I think we have a huge untapped opportunity in that space. So I think his question is around from a small older farmer and the SMEs, how do we start creating opportunities for them?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. And I think, I was doing another event earlier today, and there always this question comes up about SMEs, and there's so many SMEs in Africa, and it's such a high percentage of employment, and the economy. And our view has always been, I mean, yes, we should be supportive of SMEs, but to us, the anchor is a little bit the bigger companies, to be honest, that we need, to create the ecosystem so I'm sorry, my dear friend, the name escapes me, from Rwanda, our friend who's doing the Rwanda coffee. Sorry?
Scott Ford.
Scott, yeah, sorry, Scott. Yeah, you get stressed when you're speaking. But Scott made the point. He was very appreciative of having Walmart as a client, to have Omni Hotels, I think, as a client for coffee. And I think it just illustrates that, as a small company, in many, many cases, you need to get involved in an ecosystem that has a large anchor, right, on that. And so if we take Olam, for example, in Nigeria, or even Dangote Rice, they have the model of they put together 5,000 hectares in an area, grow rice, and then they have the outgrower program. So all the farmers around who are also growing rice, they provide the extension, they'll often provide the inputs, et cetera. And help them de-risk. Now, obviously, that arrangement can sometimes not, it needs to be beneficial to the farmers who are taking all the risk on that. But I think you need to have the big players doing some of that de-risking, because it's very risky just to be a smaller, medium-sized player in some of these value chains, particularly in agriculture. But that said, I still think the opportunities are immense, particularly maybe for medium-sized companies. So someone that can process tomatoes. We lose 50% of our tomatoes in Nigeria on that. But to know that you have off-takers. So for example, if you're going to do sorghum in Nigeria, to know that Heineken breweries, not Nigeria breweries, and brew Heineken is going to be your off-taker. You know that there's a fair way to set the price. I mean, that is kind of the anchor to be able to grow agriculture and agricultural processing. Sometimes I worry that in Nigeria, we're heading into kind of this just massive push for agriculture without really thinking through the structure or the risk. I mean, being the farmer is a very risky proposition. You have to put all your inputs up front. You then have lots of risk around weather and output and how much yield you get. You then have lots of risk around price. You have lots of risk around physical transportation on that. So you need some bigger players in that system to be able to create the environment where the farmers can do well for themselves.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew. I mean, if you were here in person, we'll all be clapping for you. So here's my clap. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. And like I said, this is a journey, and thank you for being a part of this journey with us.
No, it's a great honor for me to be part of it, Torian, and to be here today. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic.